Welcome to Season 4 of Purposeful Empathy, a show dedicated to conversations with people from around the globe who understand the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. Today's episode is brought to you by Grand Huron International, an on-demand coaching provider for individuals and companies. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the show. Welcome to a new episode of Purposeful Empathy. Today I'm joined by Melissa Larkin-Skinner, who is CEO of Centerstone Florida, a behavioral health prevention and treatment organization. As a licensed mental health counselor, Melissa's worked with children and adults of all ages in diverse mental health and addiction treatment programs. Over the past 26 years, she has designed and operated innovative programs to meet community needs. She regularly provides state and federal policy feedback and engages in legislative advocacy as a mental health and addiction subject matter expert in Tallahassee and Washington, D.C. In August of 2016, she received the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association Administrator of the Year for her efforts toward combating the opioid epidemic. So welcome so much to the show, Melissa.
Thank you, Anita. I'm happy to be here.
So let's start there with the opioid epidemic. I mean, here we are in the middle of COVID, right? As we're taping this, everybody knows a lot about COVID. And, you know, people have heard about the opioid epidemic, but I don't think people know as much about it. So what do you think would be useful for our listeners and viewers to know about that?
I think the most important things for people to know is that it is a real thing. 81,000 people died of drug overdoses in the United States, which is where I live, last year. That data just came out. The year before that, it was in the mid 70s, low 70,000 number of people. And 80% of those overdoses for several years in a row were opioid related. So if you go all the way back to 2007, 2008, 2009, one of the things that happened, we realized, is that people were being prescribed opioids for pain. And there was a lot of attention on people shouldn't have to be in pain. And opioids are marvelous at taking care of pain, acute pain. But what happened is that there was a lot and people started to become addicted. I mean, there are lawsuits right now against Purdue Pharmaceuticals, for instance, and other manufacturers, as well as pharmacies, big pharmacy chains, because of the amounts of opioids that were going into the community. Tack on to that, we put in legislation to try to quell that so that we didn't have prescription opioids going out into the community like they were back then. And the big cartels, drug cartels, kind of filled that void. You know, people were already addicted. And so now we have, there's still the prescription issue, although it's much less than it was, but we have other opioids like heroin and fentanyl. And then the latest is that those things are being mixed with stimulants, cocaine and methamphetamine. So what we really have is a drug epidemic. An addiction epidemic. You could call it any of those things. It just really came to light because of opioids.
And so, you know, there's still maybe a tiny little population of people that say, you know, get over it. It's not an illness and it doesn't need treatment. It's like, just have some self-control. What do you say to that?
Yeah. It's easy to want to believe that. Right? Because that's easy. And then if I have self-control, or if I'm a person who thinks I have self-control, then it's not going to happen to me. The problem with addiction is it sneaks up on you. Nobody, and I'll say this, no one ever wants to be addicted. No one starts out saying that. No one starts out believing it will happen to them. The problem with it is that once you put a substance in your body that is addictive, physically addictive, your body likes it and starts to sort of adapt and embrace it. And everybody's different. So somebody could become very addicted to alcohol and never become addicted to any other drug. Mm-hmm. And then, but the vice versa, right, of that. You can become addicted to cocaine, a stimulant, and never become addicted to alcohol or any other kind of drug, no matter how much of it you use. The problem is it's a little bit of Russian roulette. You don't know. You don't know. And so I think that the important thing for people to know is that to always be aware there are addictive substances. And when you put them in your body, you are taking a chance. And I'm sure, start out not believing that you will ever be addicted and that you have the willpower and the strength. Well, sure, we all have willpower and strength to overcome some things, but our bodies sometimes will overrule that. And that's why there's treatment, not only treatment, but also prevention, and just people being generally aware that it could happen to you. It can happen to anyone. Some of us are really lucky and it doesn't. And others can pick up something one time and their body's like, ooh, I really like that. And the body craves it. And the brain starts to crave it. It changes your body chemistry, your brain chemistry. And that drug or alcohol becomes all things to you. So,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was just going to ask a little follow-up, which is, so if that's the case and someone's addicted to opioids or some other substance, what empathy advice would you give to loved ones, family members, when it comes to managing that relationship?
It's really hard because you love that person. You care about that person. You see them destroying themselves. And I think it's easier to have empathy when they're doing that because you don't want to see them do that. Where it becomes difficult is when they start doing really awful things to you as their loved one or awful things to other people they love. It starts to get much harder to find empathy for them. And so the advice I have is to always remember that it's the disease, it's the addiction, the drug, the alcohol, not the person. Mm. I do believe that inside that person is who they always were. Mm. The problem is that they're facing is that the drug and the alcohol take over. And at times it's so bad that drug and that alcohol are more important than anything else in the world. And finding the next fix or the next drink is more important than anything else in the world. And that hurts. That hurts the people who love that person. But always trying to remember, and I tell the folks who I work with the same thing, always try to remember that it's the drug, it's the alcohol, it's the illness, the addiction, it's the mental health issue, it's those things that are causing the behavior, that are behind the behavior, that are saying those mean things and doing those mean things. The person is still in there. We just have to find a way to reach them and help them crawl up out of the muck. You know, they don't want to be there any more than we want them there.
Yeah. That's great advice. I'm glad I asked that. So you've worked in mental health for nearly 3 decades. What role does empathy play in your profession?
Empathy is it. Honestly, we're all about empathy. And I kind of came into this in a sort of roundabout way. I was actually majoring in biology originally.
Okay, scientist.
And I always thought, well, psychology is a soft science, biology is a real science, you know, biology, chemistry. That was my young sort of attitude, not knowing anything, right? Then I took a beginning psychology course, and I had a really outstanding professor who worked in the field. And I was hooked, basically. And I changed my major. And I have to say that even though I sort of came into it a roundabout way, it wasn't my intent. I do believe that why I ended up here is because I do have empathy. I once told my mother that I, over the years, have built up protections for myself because if I just let my empathy loose, so to speak, I would be in a fetal position in a puddle of my own tears every single day. And to do this work, I have to have empathy, absolutely, because people say and do terrible things. And I have to remember why I'm here, and I have to have hope that we can make a difference in people's lives, and we can help them become stronger and help them thrive. That's what we do and why we do what we do. But I have to protect myself. And I think everyone that has a lot of empathy has to do that to a certain extent, because we have to have a way to be resilient and bounce back, because we're not only taking on our own sort of feelings and reactions and walking in our own shoes, but we're also then taking in from everyone else around us. And empathy is the absolute key to everything that we do.
So you mentioned, this idea that you have to kind of also have a certain degree of protection around you. I want to unpack that a little bit, because I think what you're talking about is having some self-care, and ensuring that you're being self-compassionate. So I think in the healing professions and in the helping professions, there's a huge disproportionate amount of burnout and, compassion fatigue. So what are some of the tools and practices that you've put in place so that you do take care of yourself and that you mitigate against that fatigue, that compassion fatigue?
So I'm just going to qualify this by saying I am not the role model for that. I don't always take good care of myself. And then really it's just because I'm passionate about what I do. But I do recognize, some years ago, I recognized I absolutely have to take at least one time a year where I am out of work and completely disconnected for 2 weeks straight. That's one thing I have to do. Otherwise, I do get burnout, and I totally lack creativity, and that's not healthy for anybody, and it's not helpful to the people who work here and the folks that get services here if I have no creativity. Empathy, another problem with burnout is that empathy kind of dwindles. It decreases a little bit because you get so stuck. So another way that I do it is I just try to do the things I enjoy. I like to fish. I like to play video games. I like to read. I read constantly, just to disconnect from anything related to work, disconnect my brain, disconnect physically. I'm lucky enough to live in a part of the world where all year round we can be outside. We can be outside on the water. I live 15 minutes from the Gulf of Mexico. So I find the waves anywhere in the world, but very soothing. And so just going and sitting on the beach and listening to the waves and vegetating is good too. So.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing that. I miss the waves so much, so I should come out and visit sometime.
You should.
I should. What do you think? You've spoken about family members and how they can have empathy for people who are going through addictions, but what do you think society at large can do to have and show more compassion and empathy to people who are living with mental illness or addiction, like at a large level, policy-wide or otherwise? You talk about advocacy work you've done.
So I always believe in awareness, right? You have to be aware there's an issue before you can really take any action. And I think that in the past, most people saw addiction and mental health issues as that other family's problem. That's not in my family. It's in that other family over there. And we can have empathy for them, right? But we don't have that in our family. I'm here to tell you that it's in every family, everyone's lives, everyone. Somehow you are touched by it. And you may not know it until you're not aware of it. Because there's a lot of stigma. Again, back to nobody wants to be addicted. Nobody wants to be related to someone who's addicted. But it is, I live life by this. It is what it is. And so we can continue to deny it, which isn't going to help anybody. We can complain about it and be upset about it. And that's rightfully so. But what we got to do is figure out, okay, what are we going to do about it? And take steps to change it. I'm an action-oriented kind of person. So the first thing is awareness. is really educating ourselves, and listening. Listening is a key completely to empathy. If you're not listening to people, how can you possibly have empathy for them? So listening, trying to figure out what is it someone's really saying to you, really conveying to you. Is there something that maybe they're trying to hide and not convey to you, like that they're depressed and feeling really bad? But watching, observing, I mean, you don't have to be obvious about it, but I think maybe a better way to say it is just being wholly focused and giving someone your complete attention. So awareness about the issues that are out there, whatever they are, becoming more aware that, for instance, 1 in 5 adults will experience a mental health issue this year, and 1 in 6 kids. It's important to know that, because then when you look around and you see the number of people around you, you know about how many in that group of people are going to experience something very stressful, like a mental health issue or addiction. So that's another way. And then just being aware. And I tell this story sometimes. I actually just told it yesterday to a city commission. I was going through a McDonald's drive-through. Yes, I go to McDonald's sometimes.
It's loud.
And the person taking the orders was kind of mean. And I pulled up to the window, and now I could have been angry and been mean back. But as I was thinking about it, and then I pulled up to the window and saw her, I thought, gosh, she must be having a really bad day. So when she reached to take my money, I said, "Are you okay? Because it seems like you might be having a really bad day." And she just looked at me, and then she took a deep breath and she said, "You can tell, huh?" And I said, "Yeah, I can." I said, "And I really hope your day gets better, whatever's going on." And she said, "You know what? I'm gonna try harder to not let it show to all of you out there," basically is what she was saying. So the other way is just to always remember that whatever someone is doing, they're not doing it to aggravate you. They're not doing it to be mean. They probably just have something else on their minds. You have no idea. You don't know what they've been through, what they're experiencing. They didn't cut you off, on the road because they just want to irritate you. And it's hard to remember that stuff sometimes, but they could be in a hurry to get to the hospital because somebody they love is sick. You just never know. So trying to remember those things. We all have bad days. There are days that sometimes we're not very nice. But just kind of back off and think, okay, maybe they're having a bad day. I could ask them if they're doing okay. I could smile at them. I could tell them their hair looks really great, or I like their outfit. I try to do those things when I'm thinking about it, to make people's days a little brighter.
Well, that's just a general disposition of generosity and empathy that I'm hearing for sure. I wonder if one of the things that you said earlier in your answer made me think there's a ton of important work that's happening right now, necessary work around the EDI conversation, right? Equity, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace in particular, to really help people understand issues like systemic racism. And I recently interviewed somebody who's actually trying to bring a destigmatizing mental illness in the workplace programming. And I feel like when you talked about those numbers of 1 out of 5 people in this year and 1 out of 6 kids in this year are going to have some issue around mental health, like you said, that's like if you have a classroom of 30 kids, it's 6 kids in your class, right? You're working in an office space, you have 200 people, do the numbers, do the math. And I feel like maybe there's something that leaders need to hear, right? You're a CEO of an organization. What advice would you offer to leaders in particular to help them kind of reframe this issue? Because it's being framed as absenteeism, as, low productivity, turnover, all these kind of bottom line issues, when in fact you're dealing with humans who are just living life, and a complicated life at that. So what advice have you got?
Again, I'd go back to awareness, but I've also been thinking a lot recently, what we do in this field is not easy. I have both outpatient and inpatient programs. And the inpatient programs are people who are very oftentimes out of control. They're having like a psychotic episode, for instance, and they can be really mean. And the staff that are there have to be there with them for 12 hours straight. And they call names, say terrible things. I mean, I've been called a couple of things just recently for the first time in my career. But I think there are two things. One is we can't, as employers or leaders, we can't accept people being mean to each other. We can't just let it slide because they're having a bad day or whatever. Because at the end of the day, we all experience things in our lives, but we do have a choice whether or not we're mean to another human being. And it's not necessary and it's not acceptable. Then there are the others who maybe say something that they didn't think was mean, they didn't mean to be mean, or it wasn't their intent to be mean, but the person on the other end takes it in a way that is hurtful to them. And we need to be able to have open conversations about that. We need to have places where people are empowered to say, you know what, that really hurt, and let me tell you why. It's not easy to do that. I'm not suggesting that this is an overnight answer, but I think that our ideal environment is one where somebody can have a bad day. They can say something that they don't intend to be mean, but is hurtful to someone, but that person can stand up and say, that really hurt, and let me tell you why, so that both parties can learn. And then maybe going forward, that won't happen again. That would be the goal. And then there's resilience, which is my soapbox now. There is so much coming at us, all of us. It's a worldwide thing, right? COVID has sort of unleashed this worldwide commonality that we all have, whether it's the fear of COVID itself, the fear of giving it to someone else, the fear for our loved ones, the fear associated with lockdowns and economic challenges and so on and so forth. The fear of the vaccine. I mean, there's fears. We're just inundated with things to be afraid of. And very similar to when other people are being mean or saying mean things or hateful things, we can't control it. We don't have control, which is part of our challenge. And I think the way we come through it is resilience. We have to have resilience. So one of the things that I'm really working on and pushing here is finding a way to help people develop the building blocks of resilience. Because I want to make it clear for people that resilience isn't just something that happens. There are building blocks that lead to people being resilient. And I think that is the key to burnout, the key to dealing with all the hate that comes our way and dealing with things like COVID and the fallout from COVID.
Could you share a little bit about the building blocks of resilience, if you don't mind?
Sure. And I also want to say that, we all have different lives we lead, different experiences in the world and every day. And I know that it's easier for some folks than others, but I think that that's not a reason not to use the building blocks or to teach them. Mm-hmm. So decision making, how to make decisions, how to weigh, the different options when I'm going to make a decision. Problem solving. So we're all presented with problems in our lives. And if we can learn a way to look at a problem and then work through it and the possible solutions, I think it would help us all. Conflict resolution. There's going to be conflict. We can't get away from it because human beings are very complex and just conflictual by nature. So we have to be able to identify there's a conflict and then have some skills to learn how to resolve it. And going back to the earlier example of somebody says something that's hurtful, not intended to be, but it is nonetheless, and that other person being able to say, that's really hurtful. And then the two of them working together to move forward is conflict resolution. Emotional regulation is another one. So I, like every other human being, I feel different emotions. They are different intensities. And we need to be able to teach folks to identify an emotion that they may be feeling, especially an intense one, and then what to do next. The feelings are inevitable. We're going to feel them no matter what. And I don't think we should ever be upset with ourselves or others because we feel an emotion. It's all about, what do we do with that emotion? What is our behavior following that emotion? Mm-hmm. So those are examples of the building blocks of resilience. And then self-care, of course, you already mentioned that. Absolutely, self-care is a critical element, because if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't even use those things. We're not going to remember them. We're going to get caught up in the emotion and the conflict. And we're not going to step back and take a breath and go, okay, this isn't going in a good direction. I need to do something different.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned COVID a couple of times in that answer. So that begs the question, here you are providing services on the front line of mental health and addiction care. And, there's the larger frame of just healthcare providers and healthcare provision writ large during COVID. And I think, there's a bunch of people walking on water that are working crazy hours against all odds, that deserve our love and affection and appreciation. What do you think people who are working on the front lines, providing services in healthcare, deserve by way of empathy from the public? That, if you had a message to the wide public, like, hey, it would go a long way in terms of providing some gratitude and empathy and compassion towards all our providers, what would you offer?
So, empathy is all about understanding where a person's coming from, understanding their experience as they live it, understanding their feelings, identifying with it. And I think what I would tell people is you have to think about what they're really doing, what they're giving up, what they're risking. All of the healthcare workers across the world are risking a tremendous amount to be able to help others. And it's because I believe they're doing it because they have empathy for others. They don't want others to be sick. They don't want other people to die. They want to do what they can. It's why they went into the field in the first place. They want to do whatever they can to help prevent that, to help prevent families from losing a loved one, to help prevent people from becoming ill. And I think the work that they do, they're of course saving lives, but they're also bringing about a brighter future for us all. Providing the treatment as well as doing the vaccinations is hopefully going to bring about a brighter future for all of us. And things are going to, I don't know, I hate always saying go back to normal, because I'm not a big fan of even saying normal. Everything can be, change isn't bad, I guess, is what I want to say. What I want is a better, right? I want to go somewhere that's even better. And what I've been hanging on to the whole time is, throughout history, there have been some really devastating events. And as human beings, we've emerged better. And I hope that's what we see this time. I've been hanging on to that. It's not even just hope for me. I believe it. I believe we're going to emerge better. And part of that, I hope, is that we emerge with more empathy for each other.
Me too. Yeah, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. As a final question, I've gotten into the habit of asking guests to share a story, if you'll indulge one, of a time when you were on the receiving end of empathy and what that meant for you.
So I have to say, I've been racking my brain for that one event. And this may seem like me taking the easy way out, but I hope it doesn't. Honestly, my life has been filled with people who've shown me empathy. And it continues to this day. I'm a fairly intense person, and oftentimes I feel emotions intensely, and I can be short sometimes. I can be distracted. I'm always thinking about the next thing, or that other thing I have to do, or, oh my gosh, I forgot something. And I think the people around me, without even maybe knowing it, show me a great deal of empathy by putting up with me. It makes sense. It allows me to be me. It allows me to kind of also take a step back and look at myself and say, I need to attend to that person a bit more than I did and stop being distracted. It allows me to lead this organization because they are showing me that empathy. And that's to say nothing about my parents, who I was a pretty good kid, but I also don't like to be told what to do. So I would rebel a little bit. I'm really like, I'm going to do whatever I want. You can say whatever you want. But my parents, they saw that as just me growing up. They were fairly strict, but they also gave me some room, and I believed that shows empathy as well. That was how they conveyed empathy. And then, of course, the teenage years, I was a little bit of a crier. I was hurt easily.
Okay.
Which, my parents took care of me when I was like that. So anyway, I've had people who've shown me empathy throughout my life, and I still do every day. And it's an amazing gift.
And and this has been an amazing gift. I think the work you're doing is so important, and you're speaking on behalf of a lot of other people who are providing the same kind of important service. And thank you for that. And I think through, no surprise that empathy has been thread throughout our whole conversation, but at every level, whatever the topic was that we covered, it kind of rises to the surface that I feel very strongly about this, that there's an emphasis these days in education around STEM, STEM for science, technology, engineering, math. And I came across recently STEAM with some new E's, one for environmental sustainability and one for empathy. And I really feel like we need to make it a bigger deal in our school system throughout our life, because we all serve to benefit if we have more empathy in the world, in our lives, in our relationships, in the way that, we make decisions about important things going on in the world. So thank you for giving all that space to empathy to surface.
I couldn't agree more. We need to be teaching empathy. I actually think it's also a building block of resilience. Having empathy for others will help us be more resilient individually as well as communities.
So with that, I want to thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you all for watching and listening. See you next week at the next episode of Purposeful Empathy. Now, what if you had access to your own council of coaches to help you break free from your own thinking clutter, make that important decision, and liberate you from whatever is holding you back? At Grand Huron International, you get to select a coach of your choice anytime from anywhere. Visit grandhuroninternational.com and harness the power of on-demand coaching today.